From the damp valleys of northern Moravia, buried between moss-covered slopes and forests thick with the breath of old gods, there once lay a village so small, so quiet, that it appeared on no map. It was called Vivigrad, though few remember that name now. The ground there was soft, too soft like it remembered sorrow. And if you wandered into those woods in the dead of winter, you might hear singing. Not birdsong, not wind, something slower, like a lullaby meant for something already dead. The records we have are fragments, woodblock prints, a faded diary, a priest's letter smuggled in wax. They speak of a famine in the winter of 1732. But what makes Vivigrad different from the other villages struck by hunger that year is not what they lacked, but what they fed. It began, as most curses do, with kindness. A boy named Luca drowned in the Zera River that October. The current took him under just as the sun disappeared, and by morning, only his scarf remained caught in a knot of reeds, stiff with frost. His mother, Mila, screamed into the water until her voice left her. She stayed by the riverbank for 2 days, refusing food, refusing warmth, calling his name as if it were a prayer. The villagers pitied her. Mila was a weaver, known for her generous spirit and strange eyes too, pale like polished stone. Some said she descended from the forest people, those who never fully left the trees, but others dismissed it as village talk. Still, none could ignore what followed. By All Souls' Day, they found Mila standing upright in her cottage, hands blackened, eyes open. She had died of starvation, but her face was serene, as if she had joined Luca somewhere beyond frost and breath. That night, the crying began. The sound came from beneath the village through cellars and hearths and under floorboards. Low at first, like a child with no tongue. The villagers searched, but there was no beast, no bandit, no truth they could hold. Then the bread began to spoil. The roots in the cellar twisted like worms. Milk turned red. The priest, Father Ivo, called a meeting in the chapel. He was too old to kneel, but he held the room with the weight of dread. "This is not a pestilence," he said. "This is a hunger with a face." They thought him mad until old Wojciech, the pig farmer, tried to flee. He packed his cart at night with cured meat and rye, but the next morning, his wagon was still their wheels melted like wax, horse dead, mouth open as if screaming at something only it could see. Then came the dream. Every villager had the same vision. A boy in the snow, thin as breath, arms stretched wide, standing just beyond the tree line. He never spoke. He only looked, and they awoke with their mouths dry, stomachs aching, a hunger that no food could touch. And so the first offering was made. It was old Wojciech's wife, Ivana, who lit the first fire. She boiled the potatoes, salted the pork, cut the bread into perfect squares. At midnight, she carried the meal into the woods and left it where the dream boy stood. She returned with empty hands under full belly. The next morning, the village awoke to warm wind. Snow melted from the rooftops. A raven sang. The crying had stopped. They say the second feeding is always easier. And so it was in Vivigrad. What had once been terror began to dress itself in ritual. Each night a different home prepared a feast, not for the living, but for the thing that watched them from the trees. It became known as the table, though no one dared name it aloud. Bread, meat, soup, sweet dumplings, all carried under a moon that watched like a butcher's eye. They placed the food at the forest's edge, beneath the old pine where Mila used to sing lullabies to Luca, and each time the meal was gone by morning. At first, this bargain seemed blessed. The village thrived. Livestock stopped dying. Children stopped crying in their sleep. Even the river, once black and swollen with decay, ran clear again. But hunger is never satisfied. It only learns to ask more sweetly. By January, the villagers were skin and shadow. Their stores were gone, yet the offerings grew larger. They fed the table before they fed themselves. Mothers went to bed hungry so their children might eat. But even the children began to dream of the pale boy in the woods. He was no longer silent. He now whispered more. He said, "You are not yet empty." Father Ivo, ever the skeptic, tried to defy it. On the 12th night, he refused to bless the meal. He poured wine into the soil and declared, "No more food for shadows." That night, his chapel bell rang without wind. By dawn, The stone floor was cracked in the shape of a child's hand, and the priest was found hanging, arms stretched wide like the dream boy's pose, except his eyes had been turned to salt. They buried him without a word. No one rang the bell. Again. Then the snow came. It fell not from the sky, but from the trees thick, grey flakes that smelled of ash. Crops vanished beneath it. Wells froze shut. The town was no longer feeding a ghost. It was nourishing a god of famine that had been born from its own grief. Some tried to flee. A group of 7 left before dawn, hauling what bread remained, but they never made it past the first ridge. The searchers found them days later, faces torn away, mouths stuffed with frost-bitten petals. No prints around them, no struggle, just silence. It was Marek, the miller's son, who spoke what everyone feared. "It's not a ghost," he said. "It's Luca." They remembered how he'd drowned, how Mila had screamed not like a mother, but like something ancient had been broken in her. They began to wonder if her death had opened a door not to heaven or hell, but to something colder, a hunger that wore her son's face. Marek proposed a final solution. We must stop feeding it. Let it starve. Let it pass. But even as he spoke, his hands trembled. Hunger had made them believers. And so, one night, no one brought food. No fire was lit. The forest remained still until midnight. A howl, like 1,000 wolves, poured through the chimneys. Doors burst open. Ash rained from the hearths. And then, one by one, every firstborn child vanished. No footprints, no struggle, just cold beds and silence. The forest whispered, "You are not yet empty." They say this story isn't true, that it didn't happen, that all the records are made up. But here's the thing, if you find yourself in the woods long enough, you will hear the wind shift and the leaves whisper stories that have nothing to do with you. A place where breath continued only because it did not yet know how to stop. Mothers tore their hair. Fathers tore the earth. He said he found the boy, or what was left of him, standing beside the river. His face was still but wrong, to smooth dot to pale. And when Marek tried to speak, the boy raised a hand and laid a finger against his lips. Marek never spoke again. The village emptied. Some died. Some fled, but none stayed. By the end of that year, Vivigrad had vanished from every record, save for one final entry in a traveler's journal dated October 1733. Passed through a clearing today. Trees grow in a ring, in the center a stone table. Cold wind, no birds, felt, watched, left offerings from my pack. Bread and salted pork, don't know why, seemed polite. And beneath it, one last line in trembling ink. It was gone by morning. No one spoke of the forest anymore. It had become part of them, threaded through their veins like root and rot. But even grief can ferment into obedience. They resumed the offerings, no longer with pride, nor even fear, but with the dull resolve of the condemned. Food was scraped together from bark, insects, boiled leather. Old women ground up their own teeth into powder and mixed it with broth, believing it might be rich in marrow. Each night, the meal was laid beneath the pine, and each morning the plate was licked clean. In return, the forest gave nothing. No warmth, no dreams, only that bone-deep cold. The kind of chill that rots memory and makes even love seem like a childish invention. Only one villager dared speak aloud what others barely dared to think. "We were never feeding a ghost," said Danik, the carpenter. "We were feeding our guild." He was not wrong. The truth came not from a book, nor from a priest, but from the mouth of a mad girl named Clara. They found her on the hill one morning, laughing through bloody teeth. She had not spoken in weeks, and now her voice was a riddle of thunder and lullabies. She pointed at the trees. "It's not Luca anymore," she whispered. "It never was. That's just the skin it wears." They tied her to a post not from cruelty but desperation. Her words had unstitched what little hope remained. That night, Clara vanished. Her ropes still tied. Only her skin remained, draped neatly over the post like a nightgown. By spring, there were fewer than 20 souls left in Vivigrad. Hollow-eyed, slow-moving, whispering to themselves in a language older than Czech. The table was now permanent. An altar of rotting wood and blood-stained stone. No one knew who built it, only that it had always been there waiting. And then, one night, it stopped. The food was untouched. The snow had melted. Birds returned to the branches. The river laughed again. The survivors wept, but not with joy. They had fed the ghost so long that its absence felt like abandonment. Stories that happened before you were born and will continue long after you're dead. And sometimes those stories claw their way out of the earth and into your dreams. This is one such story. In the village of Vivigrad, life was a patchwork quilt of routine. Day bled into day, season into season, and each man and woman knew their place in the weave. And then one day, two children went missing, Jan and Lucas, best friends with hair the color of wheat and eyes that shone like limestone. One moment they were racing through the village square, and the next they were swallowed by the woods. Their parents searched, the entire village searched, but no trace of the children could be found. Then a third child disappeared and another until the forest had claimed 9 victims. Panic pricked at the villagers, but fear bound it tightly shut. No one wanted to admit the truth. No one wanted to look at the hungry woods circling their town. They chose instead to feed the ghosts of their children. The morning after the children vanished, Vivigrad ceased to be a village. It became a wound. Marek wandered into the woods that night. He was the last to see it.